Did Pope Francis describe Israel's assault on Gaza as a genocide? And if so, does that mean future dialogue with both sides is dead? Join us with the latest from the Eternal City, Church Militant's Rome correspondent, Dr. Jules Gomes. Jules, Church Militant has taken great pains to report the facts on the Middle East conflict without skewing those facts with editorial one way or the other. But is Pope Francis being accused of taking sides in this conflict?
Brad, what Pope Francis may or may not have said has huge ramifications for both political and theological aspects of the Middle Eastern conflict. In fact, a friend of mine who is organizing a meeting of Italian parliamentarians, senators, rabbis, evangelical Christians, and Monsignor Dario Vigano, a high-ranking Italian cleric. And I've been invited to that meeting today. The meeting, from what I gather, seems to have been organized to allay these tensions, the sudden flare-up between Pope Francis's apparent equivocation on the Israel-Palestine conflict and the way and particularly the way Israel is viewing his responses.
Let's get to the root of that, those tensions and what went on, Jules. Did Pope Francis say or do something to lead people to believe he was leaning towards Palestine in the conflict?
Well, first of all, just after the, Hamas attacked Israeli civilians, massacred so many of them, and took a number of others as hostages, Pope Francis spoke on the issue, and he gave a sense of equivocating, and as a result, the Israeli Foreign Minister, Eli Cohen, wrapped Pope Francis, basically calling this moral equivalence between Hamas and Israel abhorrent. And I reported on this story at the end of October. However, 2 weeks ago, Pope Francis met 10 Palestinians in the morning at his residence. He also met the families of the Jewish hostages or their representatives, but he only met them after days and days of delay. That's what the Israelis tell us. And he only met them after he agreed to meet the Palestinians on the same day. You can see him meeting the Palestinian representatives. Now, what happened when he met the Palestinians? There were 10 of them, and they tell us at an afternoon press conference. They met with Pope Francis in the morning. They held this press conference in the afternoon, and they told us that Pope Francis used the word genocide to describe Israel's incursion into Gaza and the whole hostage rescue attempt. These were his words, according to Shireen Awwad Hilal, who is a member of I think she's the director of the Bethlehem Bible College. She was there talking to Pope Francis, and the Bethlehem Bible College in Bethlehem is an evangelical, very pro-Palestinian evangelical Bible college. And she reported and said, Pope Francis actually said the words, "I see the genocide," when they described to him the plight of the Palestinians there. However, when journalists contacted the Holy See press office, Matteo Bruni, who is the Vatican spokesman, he said, these are his exact words, he said, "I am not aware the pontiff used such a word." He went on to say words that represent, he may have used words that represent the terrible situation lived out in Gaza. But the Palestinian representative, this lady, Shireen Awwad Hilal, she shot back and she said, we were all there, we heard it, and no one has a hearing problem. And the use of this word has really, outraged the Israelis and are trying to get to the bottom of what Pope Francis actually may or may not have said.
So before we move on again, you're talking about a meeting that's going on today with rabbis and Italian parliamentary folks in the parliament, then all trying to get to the bottom of this, what was said, what was meant, and all of that. Is that correct?
Well, it seems more like a peacemaking effort from what I know, and I will report more on this after I have news from the meeting. But it seems like at the moment, evangelical Christians, a very small minority in Italy, are stepping forward and kind of building bridges between the Vatican and the Jewish community, which seem to have been burned by what the rabbis and Israelis see as Pope Francis is attempting to draw moral equivalence between the two sides.
Now, has Pope Francis himself attempted in any way to pacify Israel in maybe recent public addresses?
Well, that's a very good question, because last Sunday in his Angelus address, Pope Francis talked about the situation. He talked about the hostages, and he talked about the suffering in Gaza. So again, there was an attempt to, if you can call it that, remain neutral, draw close to both sides, or remain equally distant from both sides, walk the diplomatic tightrope. He talked about Armenia and Azerbaijani prisoners being released on both sides. He did not mention the genocide of Armenians, though he has mentioned this in the past. He also mentioned Ukraine, Palestine, and Israel all in that particular order. And then this Sunday, he again brought up the issue when he talked about the bombing of the church in the Philippines, etc. But again, it was a very careful attempt to walk this diplomatic tightrope rather than condemn Hamas categorically.
Now, experts on the Middle East, Jules, are actually criticizing the Pope's failure, or what they consider as a failure, to understand the role of radical Islam in the conflagration. Can you weigh in on this?
Absolutely, because we just mentioned the bombing of the church in the Philippines. Islamic State claimed responsibility for that. Azerbaijan and Armenia, the Armenian genocide, again, has all these conflicts. Radical Islam is undeniably playing a role here. And Pope Francis, again, never talks about that aspect of the theological or the religious side of the conflict. Again, not once has he mentioned the fact, this is what experts are telling us, that Hamas, in its founding charter, and even now, it has a clause where they call for the total elimination of Israel, and they then go on to quote the Quran to substantiate their theology of, Israel or Jewish genocide. So the fact that Pope Francis is not willing to talk about this, but even more sinister, experts are telling us, is the fact that his main dialogue partner, the Grand Imam of Al-Azhar University in Cairo, the person with whom he signed the February 2019 Human Fraternity Declaration, we are talking about Ahmed Al-Tayeb. Al-Tayeb has gone on record basically saying that it's okay if Palestinians commit suicide bombing attacks, etc., against the Israelis. Al-Azhar even issued a statement after the attack on Jewish civilians in October and praised the Hamas attackers as martyrs. Moreover, Ahmed Al-Tayeb in the past has called Christians infidels. He's called for the death penalty. He continues to support the death penalty against those who convert from Islam to Christianity or other religions, so-called apostates. And we know, of course, Pope Francis has declared the death penalty inadmissible. So the irony is quite reached there. Pope Francis, Ahmed Al-Tayeb, has also called homosexuality a disease. He detests homosexuals. And he says there's no proof that Osama bin Laden orchestrated the 9/11 attack on the Twin Towers in the United States. So there's so much that is inextricably linked to radical Islam and Pope Francis's main dialogue partner. And it seems strange that Pope Francis is totally oblivious to all this.
Well, apart from this meeting, Jules, you've been invited to today, do you think interfaith dialogue is completely dead in the water? And another question before we close out, can you help viewers understand why the Jewish response to the Vatican could really mean a blow to the achievements of Vatican II?
Well, to answer your first question, Brad, the closer Pope Francis has approached Islam in the Catholic-Muslim dialogue, the further he seems to have distanced himself from Jewish-Catholic dialogue, even though he's been a close friend of the Jewish community and prominent rabbis in Argentina. The Italian rabbis, I can tell you from my sources, my Jewish sources, are not at all happy with with his particular approach. We're coming back to is dialogue dead? That seems to be the biggest theological explosion in this whole thing. If you read the book, the academic book by John Connolly, published in 2012 by Harvard University Press, the book is titled The Revolution in Catholic Teaching on the Jews, 1933 to 1965. The main title is From Enemy to Brother. The author talks about how he quotes Father Thomas Stransky, a Paulist priest who was at the forefront of Jewish-Christian dialogue during Vatican II. And Father Thomas Stransky talks about how Vatican II's teaching on the Jews was a 180-degree turnabout from centuries of Catholic teaching. He says for the first time, the Catholic Church affirmed that God had not cancelled, abrogated his covenant with the Jews, his promises to the Jews, and the covenant was still in force. And I quote, Jews remained most dear to God. So with this, this turnaround, and now it seems like whatever one may think of Vatican II or the dialogue with the Jews, it seems like Pope Francis is undoing it, even though he is very much, pro-Vatican II, sings the highest praises of Nostra Aetate in terms of its relations with Muslims. He seems to be walking back on his relationship and the Church's relationship with the Jews.
Lots to get our heads around with all this, and regardless of whether the Pope actually used the word genocide or not, many people have died now on both sides in this conflict that has a grave potential of not only not ending, but of dragging many more countries into it. Iran, the United States, Syria, Russia, and many, many more countries. And this at a time when war with China over Taiwan, North Korea over South Korea, and Russia with NATO Europe, these are all becoming more and more probable. These conflicts are just increasingly becoming more probable of exploding into world war themselves with each passing day. So please pray during this season of Advent that the Prince of Peace will bestow peace on this very troubled world, a world at war, seemingly at war now, before that global war baptizes the world by fire. Jules, thank you so much for getting us up to speed on this story, and keep us posted on the results of your upcoming meeting to resolve these tensions in the Middle East.
Thank you, Brad.
Thanks again for watching today's episode of Rome Dispatch. This show is brought to you by donors like Real Estate for Life. If you're looking to buy or sell a home and want to support our mission, visit realestateforlife.org. Again, that's realestateforlife.org. Be sure to tell them Church Militant sent you. God bless.